My husband kissed me goodbye for a business trip, but my 6-year-old son whispered, "Mom, we can't go home," and what we saw next made my blood run cold. It was a normal Thursday, the kind you forget immediately at Lambertson. Louis International Airport. My husband Mark looked flawless in his crisp suit, a calm smile on his face, carry-on in hand, already half gone. Chicago, 3 days tops, he'd said, kissing my forehead like it was a line he delivered 100 times. Then, right as he stepped into the Transportation Security Administration line, my 6-year-old Leo tugged my hand hard and leaned in like he was sharing a secret the whole terminal wasn't allowed to hear. "Mom, we can't go back home," he whispered, his small voice trembling. "This morning I heard Dad on the phone. He said something about us and it didn't sound right." My first instinct was to laugh it off, to tell him kids sometimes misunderstand. But his eyes weren't dramatic or over the top. They were just terrified, the kind of fear that doesn't belong in a child's face. And then he added the part that made my throat tight, made my stomach clench. "Please believe me this time, because it wasn't the first warning." A few weeks earlier, he'd pointed at a dark sport utility vehicle lingering too long near the Homeowners Association mailbox cluster at the entrance of our cul-de-sac in Maplewood and told me it had been there more than once. I told him it was probably a neighbor's friend. Another morning, he mentioned Dad's office door closed before sunrise, Dad's voice low and sharp through the wood, words that didn't sound like bedtime story Dad. I told him grown-ups talk about grown-up things. I told him not to worry. Now he was trembling and my body knew what my mind kept refusing. Kids notice patterns before adults admit what they mean, so we didn't go back. I did the opposite of muscle memory. I didn't even turn toward our usual route home. I guided Leo into the back seat, buckled him in, and took the back roads, circling through unfamiliar neighborhoods like I was trying to lose a tale I couldn't prove existed. My brain kept reaching for normal chores like lifelines: the leftover grocery store tray in the fridge, paper plates under the sink for the next school parent-teacher association potluck, the PTA thread buzzing on my phone. If I could just do one ordinary thing, maybe the world would settle back into place. But it wouldn't. What we saw next was just the beginning. Instead, I parked one street over from our house, tucked in shadow between trees, engine off, lights off. From there, our home looked exactly the same as it always did: porch light on, neat lawn, the window where Leo's superhero curtains used to glow at night. My phone buzzed. A text from Mark, perfectly timed and painfully normal, just landed. "Hope you two are asleep. Love you." I stared until the letters blurred, and then I looked up because headlights had slipped into our street. Slow, too slow for someone lost, too deliberate for a neighbor coming home late. A dark van rolled past driveways like it was counting them. No decals, no front license plate I could see. Windows tinted so deep they looked like nothing at all. It stopped in front of our place and sat there, idling like it belonged. Leo's breath hitched. He hugged his backpack tighter to his chest. "That's the one," he whispered, so certain it chilled me to my core. Two men stepped out, hoodies up, movements calm, practiced like they weren't visiting, they were following steps. One of them walked straight to our front door and reached into his pocket. I expected something loud, something obvious. Instead, a brief silver glint caught the porch light for half a second, a key. And the moment it slid into our lock like it had done it before, like it belonged there, my heart went tight in my chest, a vice grip of icy fear. That's when I realized something was very, very wrong. This wasn't a random break-in. This was a plan. I thought that was the worst part. I was wrong. The men vanished inside our home, the porch light reflecting off the closed door. We sat there, hidden for what felt like an eternity. Leo was silent, huddled in his seat, just little whimpers escaping him. My mind raced, trying to find a logical explanation. A surprise Mark planned? No, not with hooded men and tinted vans. A mistake? No key fits just any lock. This was deliberate, Mark's key, and he was supposedly hundreds of miles away. The next hour was a blur of fear and desperate decision-making. I couldn't call the police. Not yet. What would I say? My husband just gave strangers a key to our house while he's on a business trip, and my child thinks something is wrong. They'd think I was crazy or that it was a domestic dispute. And what if Mark was somehow involved in something dangerous? I couldn't risk Leo. We needed to disappear to get safe before I could figure out what to do next. What they did next changed everything. I drove until the streetlights of Maplewood faded into darkness, heading east without a destination, just away. My phone buzzed again, another text from Mark: "Long day, missing you guys, love you." The words, meant to be reassuring, felt like a poisoned dart. He was playing a part, a performance of normalcy, while strange men walked through our living room. It made my skin crawl. I needed to think, to breathe. We ended up at a cheap motel miles away, the kind with flickering neon signs and thin walls. I paid cash, avoiding my cards. I felt like a criminal, but I was the one running for my life. That night, Leo clung to me, his small body shaking. He kept whispering, "Dad's bad, Mom, Dad's bad." It shattered my heart to hear him say it, but I couldn't deny the truth of his words. The next morning, everything started to unravel. I tried to use my debit card to buy food, declined. I tried the credit card, declined. Every single account. Mark had frozen or drained them all. Every joint account, every savings, he had locked me out. It was a cold, calculated move designed to leave me stranded, helpless with nothing. He didn't just abandon us, he was trying to erase us. I felt a surge of panic so strong it nearly buckled my knees. How could he do this? How could a man I shared my life with for 10 years, the father of my child, turn into this monster? This was a betrayal deeper than I ever could have imagined. I was alone with a terrified 6-year-old, no money, and no idea what those men were doing in our home. I felt utterly helpless. I tried calling his phone straight to voicemail. I tried his work number. His assistant said he was unavailable due to a sensitive project and disconnected. My friends, my family, I called them trying to sound calm, trying to explain something I barely understood myself. But Mark had already started his campaign. He had texted my sister, my best friend, even his own parents, saying I was having an episode. That I'd been acting erratically for weeks, that I'd taken Leo and disappeared, that he was worried sick about us. He painted me as unstable, a danger to my own child. They offered sympathy, but it was clear they believed him. I heard the pity in their voices, the slight hesitation. I was an emotional wreck, of course I sounded unstable. They told me to come home to talk to Mark to get help. I realized with a sickening lurch that he had isolated me completely. I had no one. We spent days moving from cheap motel to even cheaper one, sometimes sleeping in the car. Leo started getting sick, a constant cough and fever from the stress and lack of proper food. He cried for his home, for his toys, for his dad, the dad he remembered. My heart ached watching him suffer. I was failing him. I was supposed to protect him, and instead I'd led us into this nightmare. I felt every shred of my dignity, my self-worth, crumble away. I was at rock bottom. Everything was lost. But in that despair, a flicker of something else ignited. Rage, not the kind that makes you scream, but the cold, burning kind that fuels a silent war. Mark thought he had won. He thought I was broken, that I would crawl back to him eventually or just disappear. He underestimated me. He underestimated a mother pushed to the brink. I realized I couldn't fight him with brute force or legal battles I couldn't afford. I had to outsmart him. I had to learn his game. That's when my silent revenge began. I started small. I used the motel Wi-Fi to create a new untraceable email address. I remembered all those little details I'd dismissed before, Mark's late-night calls, the strange packages he sometimes received not addressed to our home, the way he always insisted on handling all the finances, saying I didn't need to worry my pretty little head about it. He often worked from his home office, which he kept locked, even from me, what was in there. I needed to know. One night while Leo was asleep, I drove back to Maplewood, staying hidden in the shadows. Our house was still there, but something felt different. The blinds were always drawn now. The lawn, usually meticulously maintained, was starting to look overgrown. It felt like a tomb. I circled the block, remembering everything, the delivery routes, the times Mark usually went to the gym, the neighbors' schedules. I started observing, learning, becoming a ghost in my own neighborhood. I remembered Mark's old laptop, the one he'd claimed was broken and just stored in the basement. He'd never gotten rid of it. I had a faint hope that it might contain something. But how to get it? The thought of going back into that house, knowing what might be inside, knowing who might be inside, sent shivers down my spine. But my child deserved answers. I needed answers. Weeks turned into a grueling, terrifying existence. We were still bouncing from cheap motels, sometimes staying with a kindly old woman I'd met at a laundromat who felt sorry for us, telling her a vague story about leaving an abusive husband. I told Leo we were on an adventure, that we were playing a special game. He was getting better, but the fear was always in his eyes. Every time he asked about going home, a knife twisted in my gut. I knew I couldn't stop until I exposed Mark for what he was. Then one night an opportunity presented itself. I saw the dark van again pulling up to our house. The two men went inside, but this time a second car followed, a sleek black sedan I didn't recognize. Another man got out, dressed in an expensive suit, carrying a briefcase. He looked important, dangerous. He was in the house for hours. This wasn't just a place to store something, it was a meeting place. Mark wasn't just doing business, he was dealing with serious people. I knew I needed that laptop. I had to risk it. I waited for 2 days, watching, observing the patterns. The men came and went but never stayed overnight. They seemed to leave by late evening, the house dark and silent until the next day. This was my chance. I couldn't waste it. I borrowed a crowbar and a flashlight from the old woman I was staying with, telling her I needed to fix a stuck shed door. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would burst out of my chest. Under the cover of darkness, I approached our house. It felt alien, hostile. I found a back window, one I knew was usually left unlocked, hidden by overgrown bushes. I remembered Mark always forgetting to lock it when he mowed the lawn. It was my only way in. I squeezed through, my breath catching in my throat, every nerve screaming. The house was cold, silent. The air hung heavy with the smell of stale cigarettes and something metallic, something I couldn't quite place. I crept through the familiar rooms, now twisted and sinister. The living room furniture was covered in sheets like ghosts. The kitchen was empty, the fridge humming faintly. It was stripped bare, almost like they were preparing it for something. I made my way to the basement. The stairs creaked under my weight, each sound echoing like a gunshot. I found Mark's old laptop tucked away in a dusty corner just where he'd said he'd left it. My fingers trembled as I grabbed it. As I turned to leave, a glint of light caught my eye. A loose floorboard. I hesitated, my intuition screaming. I knelt down, pried it up. What I found beneath it made my blood run cold for an entirely new reason. It wasn't money, it wasn't drugs, it was a stack of burner phones, dozens of them along with stacks of documents. But these weren't just any documents, they were schematics, blueprints of our house marked with strange symbols and wiring diagrams, and something else. A small sealed plastic bag containing a tiny, nearly invisible chip. A listening device. That's when the pieces clicked into place, forming a terrifying picture. Mark wasn't just using our house, he was bugging it. He was listening to me. He had been for months, maybe even longer. My hands shook so violently I almost dropped the laptop and the bag of evidence. He hadn't just betrayed me, he'd surveilled me, plotted against me. He knew every conversation, every doubt, every fear. That's why he knew exactly when to cut me off, when to turn my friends and family against me. He wasn't just draining our accounts, he was setting me up, setting us up. I remembered Leo's whisper. He said something about us and it didn't sound right. I got out of there moving faster than I ever had, clutching the laptop and the bag like they were my life. Back at the motel, I powered up the old laptop. It was slow, but it worked. I went through his old emails, his browsing history. It was a rabbit hole of dark secrets, encrypted messages with the men I'd seen, discussions about the package, the transfer, the location. Our house was the location. It was a drop point, a hub for some kind of highly illegal operation, possibly involving stolen government secrets or high-tech espionage. The small chip I found was proof he was listening to someone or everyone. And there it was in black and white, an email discussing asset relocation and eliminating loose ends, with my name, Clara Jensen, listed as a loose end. He wasn't just trying to get rid of me, he was planning to make me disappear. Permanently. This wasn't just about divorce or money anymore. This was about survival. This was about protecting Leo. And the revenge needed to be precise, devastating, and irreversible. It needed to be poetic justice. He used our home, our sanctuary, as his criminal base. He used technology to spy on me, to plot my demise. I would use his own tools against him. I spent days poring over the laptop, downloading everything, backing it up, encrypting it again. I found code words, financial transfers, names, a whole network. I didn't just have evidence, I had a weapon. I needed to deliver it to the right people, people who couldn't be bought or intimidated. And I needed to make sure Mark couldn't escape, couldn't twist the story, couldn't hurt me or Leo ever again. I remembered an old college friend, Detective Miller, who had always been sharp, ethical, and ambitious. He worked for federal law enforcement now. It was a long shot, but he was my only hope. I sent him an anonymous email from a public library computer, a carefully crafted message with just enough detail to pique his interest, but not enough to reveal myself. I mentioned suspicious activity at 123 Maple Street, possible espionage and surveillance technology. I attached a small encrypted portion of the data, a breadcrumb trail. Then I waited, my heart hammering in my chest. Days later, I saw a news report, a quiet announcement about a federal investigation into a multi-state criminal enterprise operating out of an undisclosed residential property in Missouri. No names were mentioned, but I knew this was it. I sent another anonymous email to Detective Miller, this time with a complete data dump, including the evidence of Mark's intent to harm me and his financial manipulations. I provided location details, times, and a full list of names and their roles from Mark's files. I included the listening device, the schematics, everything. I even included a detailed account of how Mark had cut me off and alienated me from my support system. I made sure they knew his tactics. The next few days were excruciating. I watched the news like a hawk. Then it happened, a national news report, a major bust, several arrests, a detailed report of an international espionage ring operating out of a quiet suburban home. They showed blurred images of the house, our house, being raided, federal agents swarming it. They talked about the sophisticated surveillance equipment found, the stolen data, the vast sums of money involved. And then a name, Mark Jensen, arrested. Charged with espionage, conspiracy, and multiple other federal crimes. The picture they showed of him, his face haggard and shocked, was a stark contrast to the perfectly composed man who had kissed me goodbye at the airport. I finally felt a breath leave my lungs, a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding for weeks. It was over, but not entirely. There was still the matter of Leo, of our future. I revealed myself to Detective Miller. He was shocked, but deeply sympathetic. Evidence I'd provided was critical. He assured me I would be protected, and so would Leo. He helped me navigate the legal maze. I filed for divorce, presenting the evidence of his crimes, his abandonment, his intent to harm. It was an open and shut case. I got full custody of Leo. All of Mark's assets, the ill-gotten gains, were seized by the government, but the house, which was technically still mine, was put into a trust for Leo after being meticulously swept for any remaining devices. The poetic justice was sweet. Mark, who had used our home as his fortress of betrayal, lost everything. He was facing decades in federal prison. His carefully constructed life of lies, money, and power crumbled around him. He thought he could manipulate me, make me disappear. But he underestimated the quiet strength of a woman scorned and the fierce love of a mother. My silent revenge had stripped him bare, exposed him to the world, and taken away the very things he valued most. He tried to cancel my existence, but instead I canceled his. I decided not to go back to Maplewood. The house held too many ghosts, too many terrifying memories. I sold it, putting the proceeds into a fund for Leo's future. We moved to a small, quiet town where no one knew our past. Leo started therapy, slowly healing, slowly learning to trust again. We were safe, we were free. And as for Mark, who thought he had outsmarted everyone, the real twist was that he didn't just set me up to be a victim. He used me as a shield, hoping if anything went wrong, I'd be the easy scapegoat, the unstable wife who went missing. But his elaborate plan to disappear me and frame me for his own crimes was exactly what led to his downfall. He built his prison, and I simply turned the key.